Hi everyone, and welcome to week 5 of our course unit, Developing Research Reflexivity. In this session, we're going to focus on exploring the research journey, how it looks like, and where and in what stages I am expected to perform my reflexivity. So the aims of the session are to become familiar with the research journey, and I call it journey rather than process, but the two notions are quite intricate, and become familiar with the stages in which research reflexivity is involved, as well as to encourage you to reflect on your own research project and your own research journey. The overview of the session is on your screen. So yes, we're going to look at different stages of the research journey, starting with a research proposal and then the following stages, which are, after planning your research proposal, planning the inquiry, we go ahead and conduct our research. We are in field work, we are working collaboratively with supervisors and other members of the research team. And then we go away to write up our research report and disseminate our findings. So in what stages is our research or reflexivity performed? Yes, you got it. In all of them. Our reflexivity is always part of the research journey, and it is done implicitly, explicitly, but it is assumed to be done throughout all of the stages. So if we look at the planning stage, we start with a research proposal. There you go, sorry. And the research proposal, as you know, it is a brief document that outlines what the plan is. So what are the things that you're going to do, how you're going to do those things, and why. Remember the 3 key questions: what, how, and more importantly, why. The why question and the how question do help us to make more explicit our decisions, how we are undertaking the project, the perspectives that we are borrowing or developing based on who we are as researchers. So it's very important to respond to that question in order to explicitly state our positionality. We will talk about that in a minute or two. So the expectation is that your research questions, your methodology, your theoretical framework are fitting. There is coherence across the document. The basic aims of the research proposal are to communicate to whoever is reading these, the reviewer, the examinate, what you're going to do, but more importantly, to persuade them that this is a worthwhile research project. You might have found a gap, you might have found a contribution to make. Well, it's important that this is stated from the very, very beginning. And thinking about, because this is a plan, you do need to think about how long this is going to take, the resources that are going to be involved, and how you're accessing your data, collecting it, analyzing it, evaluating it, and reporting it. Very, very important. One of the things that Descombe talks about in his book is that the success of a proposal depends on how good is communicated and that contribution is made very, very explicit. Structures of a proposal. We have a general structure here. The logic always follows, you state the aims, then you go and write a little bit of the literature review, what's known already. Then you have your research questions, then methodology, you do propose a timeline, and you go through some of the ethics that you're going to be undertaking. And finally, you do need to state your outcomes. And outcomes, by outcomes, we mean our contributions. What is the aim or the aims? What are the aims of our research proposal? Well, first of all, the aims provide information as to what is exactly the focus of the research project. So from the title, and a lot of people call it working title, you need to state very clearly what the key words, the key concepts associated with the investigation, the research project are, and then stating your aims. What is it that you're trying to achieve by the end of this study? Also important to describe your research context. When we talk about the literature review, the question we need to keep in our minds is, what do we already know about the topic? Throughout a literature review, we do explore those debates, the main debates that are out there about the topic, what people say about it, what positions people have taken. You're analyzing, you're comparing ideas, key issues, and findings from previous research with the purpose of situating your own positionality. So remember that the literature review does help you to develop an argument of what you are really trying to say. That's why literature review is very, very important. And through this literature review, you can find out how you might be contributing to the literature out there as well. Again, we go back to the idea of developing an argument. It does provide a starting point. It gives, it lays the foundation of your project, of the topic, and it can help us build on upon existing knowledge, fill in a gap, as I was mentioning before. You are there by analyzing the literature, adopting a critical stance or positionality, as I mentioned, and you can use it as well to deal with any current situation or to point out any issues that people haven't been able to address, and that is something that your study might be doing. Then you move on to talk about your research questions. So the main prompt here is to think about what you need to find out. They are a crucial step of the process to have clear research questions that are not ambiguous. And that's important for you to know what you're going to be doing and collecting and analyzing. They could be flexible, these research questions. Most of the time, we give them some flexibility because as well, when we start collecting data and our findings might give us more details that we were not expecting, then you can always revisit your research questions. It guides the literature review as well. This is a moment where you say, oh, by the way, this is how these two stages of the proposal are connected. And after the research questions, we do have a section on methodology. So how will you get the information that you need to answer your research questions? So the questions we ask ourselves as researchers are, what methods I'll be using and how? So, you know, this is a section of you describing the methods, what your approach is, what kind of data you'll be collecting, how much is this a longitudinal study? Is it a one moment or one time data collection? How will the data be collected? Who or what will be included, and how will the data be analyzed? Uh, Usually this section of the proposal is a bit descriptive, but if we want to make it more reflective, if we want to state explicitly our reflexivity so that our position is clear, then we move on to the next questions, justifying our decision and our choices, our decisions and choice of methods. Why have you chosen these methods? And you might go back to your, describing or connecting these ideas to your own ontology, epistemology, do your research paradigm to show coherence as well. Are the methods chosen suitable and likely to produce the data you need? Well, you need to make sure that you choose a method that will give you the data that you need to collect. And will they work? Are they feasible? You do need to think about the research context, your participants, any risks in order to see if they are feasible. So again, we move from the what stage to the how, and then why. What, how, and why. Timeline, well, how long will it take you to do this study? And I like that there's a lot of figures about timeline that are like very direct, like you start one thing and you move to the other. But in reality, well, this is the expectation, yeah. But in reality, the move is up and down, or backwards and forwards. You're constantly revisiting what you've done, moving on to different tasks, coming back to them, and it is a bit messier and less straightforward than what the expectation is. But that's natural, and that's just part of the process of doing research. It should not be seen as this, but yes, it's understanding that it's messier than what it looks like. So by providing a timeline, we are telling the examiners, how long these activities that you're going to be performing are going to take you, who might be doing these activities. You might be part of a bigger research team. So you might be involved in some of those activities and not all of them. And provide information regarding, what is already completed, what needs to be completed, and if you are finishing on time. Ethics, the question to think about when we are working on our ethics section is this research socially acceptable? Yeah. So research ethics is about setting standards for conducting research to protect the rights, welfare, and dignity of participants. They refer to the moral stance that the researchers take in relation to all of the activities that they need to operationalize, that they plan and undertake. So these stances should only be undertaken for good reasons, where it's possible, and see what outcomes what are the beneficial outcomes from the project by taking those stances. And finally, the outcomes. So what will be the benefits of the research? This is equals to the contribution. So it is a bit difficult to think about what contribution is, especially when you're starting to plan. But if you have an idea of, for instance, what is that gap that you're filling in, looking at what hasn't been done that you are going to be doing, that's in itself a contribution. And other contributions might be undercover or uncovered, sorry, that's the word, uncovered through your process of doing this research project. So outcomes, yes, can be stated ahead of the actual research, and they are concerned with the use to which the findings are put. They are about how the findings will be applied and how they will be made available. Now, we need to be aware that outcomes are not the same as findings, so we need to be careful about confusing this too. Then we move on to the next stage of the research, which is conducting it. So you have planned your research, you have developed your research proposal. Now you go away to actually conduct the project. And for that, yes, ethical approval is needed. Before you start collecting any data, you need to have approval by the institution where you're working. This is where you perform the methods that you designed and you start the data collection and analytical processes. After you've done your analysis, you then move on to writing up your findings. And then, the expectation is that after you have written up your report, you do engage in disseminating your research project. So the idea then that reflexivity is a process that is undertaken throughout the research, is a process that helps us to question our assumptions as people who are shaping research and who are being shaped by research. We have seen the idea of, this mutual shaping influence last week. So reflexivity is that thinking process that takes time, and it's performed throughout the research journey. And it is influenced by your identity, who you are, your social context, yeah. And as you are performing or operationalizing your reflexivity, in contribution with your identity, when you state in your research report, which is this bit here, the what, the how, and more importantly, the why, then you are explicitly stating that positionality, which is informed by your identity and your reflexivity. And that's how our reflexivity is, in a way, present in the research output in our research project. You could also write about your reflexivity, your research reflexivity separately from the research report, because this, involves a deeper thinking where we are justifying our decision making. And we always usually start from experience, narrating the experience, rationalizing the experience, theorizing the experience. And for that, we do need lots and lots of words, which are not, usually there's no space for that in a research project, in a research report, sorry. So a lot of people are now actually producing outputs, reflexive outputs. By that, I mean reflexive articles on the decision-making processes that they undertake while they're, conducting research. And that's an option for you to write up if you want to, as you engage in your research journey. Sorry. So explicitly stating your reflexivity as you articulate the decisions that are taken is very important. The contributions outcomes from a piece of research, they're there to prove that value that you bring in with your project. And in this value needs to be communicated. So one of the ideas is that if you're planning to publicize your work and disseminate your findings, well, you need to be clear and transparent in that, in how you, as the researcher, shaped that research project. And very importantly, one of the tips that Descombe talks about in his book is, when you do talk about the findings, you take care of maintaining that confidentiality of the data and anonymity of the participants. Right, let's move on to our group reflective practice, where we're going to explore a pre-task, what you answer for that pre-task, and the homework here is not homework, but we need to do it here in class. But the goal here is to connect the pre-task, the questions in the pre-task, with the reading that you did this week, and discuss the question, what type of reflexivity or research reflexivity is articulated in the following stages of the research journey. So we've looked at the stages as an overview, but I want you to go deeper. So what kind of things, assumptions, and beliefs you need to be exploring in the stages that we have looked at in this presentation. For that, we have 35 minutes, and then I will ask you to put your responses in Canvas.